So we finally had one of the big players ahead of this year's trade deadline traded, and it was Jason Zucker who was traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And this was a trade I was just waiting for to be official. We've had rumors about Zucker and specifically the Penguins for a few weeks now, and with Jake Guentzel being out for the rest of the season, the Penguins wanted a top 6 forward, and now they got one. So let's take a look at the trade. The Penguins acquired Jason Zucker for Alex Galchenyuk, defensive prospect Calen Addison, and a first round pick. Now I have things to say about each piece of this trade, and if I'm being honest, I don't think it's an overpayment like a lot of people are saying. Yes, the Penguins gave up a really good prospect and a first round pick, but that first round will probably, and hopefully for the Penguins, be a late pick, so you're not really missing out on an incredible player, even though this year's draft is pretty deep. And Calen Addison then, we saw him at the World Juniors putting up great numbers for Team Canada and winning gold, but I see why the Penguins chose to trade Addison and not any of their other prospects, because contrary to popular belief, the Penguins actually have a few good players in the pipeline. Simon Poulin, Nathan Legaré, and Philippe Poulander, to name a few. And I think they went with Addison because of the emergence of John Marino, who's a right-handed defenseman and he's been playing out of his mind this year. And Addison is also a right-handed defenseman and probably 1 or 2 years away from making the NHL, and by then Letang will still be playing and Marino will have an even bigger role. So Addison becomes expendable here. And you can argue giving up a prospect for Jason Zucker is an overpayment, and I get that, but the Penguins need to win now. They're in a win now mode, and this is just the price of winning. And the third and final piece of this trade is Alex Galchenyuk, and man, I had hopes for this guy going into this season. Not high hopes, but some hope that the new scenery and the chance to play with either Malkin or Crosby, when you've shown in the past that you can score 30 goals, sounded great to me, but it did not work out at all. Towards the end here of his Penguins career, he was playing on the 4th line and he was just not good enough. 5 goals in 45 games is not acceptable, and it's not a good look when you were traded for Phil Kessel either. And to be fair, Kessel hasn't been that good either this year, but he's been better than Galchenyuk. And I'm looking at Galchenyuk and his draft class, and especially the top 4 from that draft, and it's just insane how bad it is, and I almost want to make a separate video to take a look at that draft a bit more in depth. But anyways, overall, I think it's a good trade for both parties. The Penguins get what they want, and the Wild get a player in Galchenyuk, a good prospect in Addison, and a first round pick that could turn into something good in the future. Now let's take a look at the main man of the trade, Jason Zucker. He's 28 years old and he's got 3 years left on his deal at $5.5 million, so he's not a UFA, so the Penguins have some insurance there, which is really good to have. He's got 29 points in 45 games, which on the surface isn't that amazing, but he did score 33 goals 2 years ago, so he's got the capability of being a good goal scorer on a line with most likely Crosby. He played with him last night, and that's what the Penguins want, with Guentzel being out injured. And I also want to talk a little bit about what this means for the Penguins and the Wild moving forward, both short and long term. For the Penguins in the short term, it means that they're going for the cup. It's cup or bust for as long as Crosby and Malkin are good enough, and that's probably another 3 or 4 years, I would say. Which leads me to the long term for the Penguins, because I see a lot of people saying the Pens are screwed once Crosby and Malkin retire or drop off, but I'm not really sure I agree with that. If Crosby and Malkin are done in 4 years, the Penguins will still have good players. John Marino is 22 now and Marcus Pettersson is 23, and by then they will be in their prime. Jerry or Murray, whoever will stay, will be in their prime, and the forward core with players like Guentzel, McCann, and Cahoon will be good enough to lead a new generation of Penguins. And sure, they're not as good as Crosby and Malkin, but they'll probably be pretty good, and they have Nathan Legaré and Simon Poulin in their system, and they will probably be ready in a few years as well. And you never know what Jim Rutherford has up his sleeve in terms of other trades or signings, so it's not looking bad for them in the future, but like I said, the Penguins are in a win now mode, and they have acted accordingly. And for the Wild, I see this move as a future move. I don't think Galchenyuk will be the piece that gets them into the playoffs, but I hope for his sake that he finds a home in Minnesota, because this will be his 4th team in 3 years. And in the long term for the Wild, this deal makes sense. The first round pick they get can turn into something good. Calen Addison is a good prospect, and having a lot of prospects is always good. And Galchenyuk can maybe find his role in Minnesota, which would be very good for them. So that's what I have to say about this trade. I'll be covering more trades as we get closer to the deadline, because there are still some interesting names out there who are yet to be traded, and I'm pretty excited to see where they end up. And that's it for today. I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.